This isn't some story I made up for clicks. This is something that really happened to me. A memory so sharp it still feels like broken glass under my skin. It's the story of how I learned that sometimes the deepest cuts come from the people who are supposed to build you up. The California sun was relentless, baking the sea of blue graduation gowns on the UCLA lawn into a shimmering, suffocating blanket. I could feel a single bead of sweat trace a slow, agonizing path down my spine beneath the heavy fabric. My father sat in the third row, beaming, his smile a beacon of pure, uncomplicated pride. Next to him, my stepmom, Diane, was a marble statue of forced pleasantries, her smile as thin and sharp as a razor's edge. The moment the dean called my name, Eliza Vance, summa cum laude, and I walked across that stage, clutching the diploma that represented 4 years of sleepless nights and ramen noodle dinners, I thought I had finally done it. I had finally earned a piece of her respect. I was wrong. As I found them in the throng of celebrating families, clutching my diploma like a shield, Diane didn't hug me. She leaned in close, her voice a venomous whisper meant only for me, shielded by the roar of the crowd. "Don't get used to this feeling," she hissed, her eyes flicking over my cap and gown with disdain. "A piece of paper doesn't change what you are. You'll be lucky to be managing a Starbucks in a year. If you genuinely enjoy our stories, please subscribe to the channel, tell us where you're from, and what time it is right now. It's always fascinating to know how far our story flows." The drive back to our Pasadena home was a masterclass in suffocating silence. My father, bless his heart, tried to fill the void, chattering about the ceremony, about how proud my late mother would have been. But Diane's presence was a black hole, sucking all the joy and light out of the car. She stared out the window of my dad's Lexus, her lips pursed, a silent, ongoing judgment. That night, there was a small party. A few of my dad's friends, some neighbors. Diane moved through the guests with the practiced grace of a society hostess, accepting congratulations on my behalf as if she'd had any hand in my success. I watched her from the corner of the living room, a ghost at my own celebration. She'd refill someone's champagne flute, laugh at a joke, and then her eyes would find mine across the room, and the mask would slip. For a fraction of a second, I'd see the raw, unvarnished contempt. Then it would be gone, replaced by that serene plastic smile. I never understood where it came from, that bottomless well of resentment. My mom had passed away from cancer when I was 12. Dad met Diane 2 years later. She was a widow, a real estate agent with impeccable taste, and a portfolio of expensive-looking friends. She transformed our comfortable, slightly messy house into a sterile showroom from a magazine. She transformed my father, too, smoothing his rough edges, upgrading his wardrobe, curating his social life. And me? I was the one part of his old life that she couldn't sand down and refinish. I was the stubborn, unmovable ghost of his first, happier marriage. Her words at the graduation ceremony weren't just a cruel jab. They were a declaration of war I hadn't known we were fighting. For years, her attacks had been subtle. The backhanded compliments. "It's amazing you got an A in calculus, Eliza. You were never very good with numbers." The helpful suggestions that were actually thinly veiled insults. "Maybe you should try a simpler major, sweetie. Finance is so competitive." I had always brushed them off, telling myself I was being too sensitive, that she was just trying to be a parent in her own awkward way. But hearing that poison whispered in my ear on what should have been one of the proudest days of my life, it was like a key turning in a lock. Suddenly, 100 small, confusing moments clicked into place. The time a promised summer internship mysteriously fell through at the last minute. The college application fee for my dream school that was lost in the mail. The way my dad would suddenly grow distant and critical about my life choices after a long, private conversation with her. I wasn't just being sensitive. I was being sabotaged. That night, after the last guest had left and the house was quiet, I couldn't sleep. I crept downstairs for a glass of water and heard their voices from the den. My dad's was low, tired. Diane's was a sharp, insistent drill. "Frank, you have to be realistic," she was saying. "You can't keep funding her fantasies. A finance degree from UCLA means nothing without connections, and she has none." She needs a reality check. Letting her move back in here rent-free is just enabling her. She just graduated, Diane, my dad said, his voice weak. Give her a chance. A chance to do what? Rack up credit card debt while she finds herself? No. We agreed. She has 3 months to find a job and get her own place. It's tough love, Frank. It's what's best for her. I stood in the darkness of the hallway, my heart turning to a block of ice. Tough love. That was her excuse for everything. It was tough love that made her criticize my clothes, my friends, my grades. It was tough love that had her systematically dismantling my confidence, piece by piece, for the last decade. And my father, a good man worn down by grief and loneliness, was so desperate for the peace she offered that he let her do it. He let her poison his own daughter. I retreated back to my room, the glass of water forgotten. The diploma on my nightstand seemed to mock me. She was right about one thing. A piece of paper didn't change anything. Not yet. Lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, a cold, hard clarity washed over me. The hurt was still there, a raw, open wound. But underneath it, something new was beginning to form. Not anger, not sadness, but a quiet, chilling resolve. She thought I was a failure. She thought I was weak. She had spent years ensuring I believed it, too. She wanted me to manage a Starbucks. She wanted me to be small and broken and dependent. Fine. I would play her game. I would let her believe she had won. But while she was busy admiring her reflection in the polished surfaces of her perfect life, I would be in the shadows, building an arsenal. I didn't know what my revenge would look like, not yet. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty. 2 years. I gave myself 2 years. In 2 years, I wouldn't just prove her wrong. I would take something from her. Something she loved, something she coveted. I would buy her dream. And I would let her watch me drive it away. The first step was leaving. The 3-month deadline she'd given me was a gift, a perfect excuse. I packed my bags, took the meager savings I had, and found a tiny, rundown studio apartment in Koreatown, an hour's drive away in LA traffic. I told my dad it was to be closer to job interviews. He looked relieved and guilty all at once, pressing a few $100s into my hand when Diane wasn't looking. Diane, for her part, looked triumphant. She helped me pack, a sickeningly sweet smile on her face, offering bubble wrap for my tchotchkes, and giving me a patronizing little speech about budgeting. "You'll see, sweetie," she said, taping up a box of books. "This is the best thing for you. The real world is a tough teacher, but you'll learn." It took every ounce of my self-control not to tell her I'd already had the toughest teacher imaginable living under her roof. The next 6 months were brutal. I sent out hundreds of resumes to investment firms, banks, and corporate finance departments. The replies were a steady stream of polite rejections. "We've decided to move forward with other candidates. The position has been filled. While your qualifications are impressive," Diane's voice was a constant echo in my head, "you have no connections." She was right. I was just another face in a sea of bright, ambitious graduates. I ended up taking a job as a junior data entry clerk at a small, faceless insurance company in Glendale. The pay was abysmal. The work was mind-numbing. It was the very definition of a dead end. Every Sunday, I would drive to Pasadena for the obligatory family dinner. It was torture. I'd sit at the massive mahogany dining table, picking at the dry pot roast Diane had made, and listen to her talk about her latest real estate sale or a lavish party she'd attended. She'd always ask about my job with a tone of feigned interest that was dripping with condescension. "How are things at the insurance place, Eliza?" "Still enjoying it." "It's fine," I'd say, keeping my voice neutral. "I'm learning a lot." "That's wonderful," she'd reply, her eyes glittering. "It's so important to have realistic goals." My dad would shift uncomfortably in his chair, but say nothing. I went along with it. I let her think I was exactly where she wanted me to be. Struggling, insignificant, beaten. I wore drab clothes to these dinners, complained about my landlord, talked about how expensive gas was. I painted a perfect picture of a life teetering on the edge of failure. But back in my tiny apartment, a different life was taking shape. My soul-crushing day job ended at 5 p.m. My real work started at 6. My degree wasn't in high finance theory. It was in quantitative analysis. I was good with numbers. More than good. I could see patterns in data that other people missed. While my colleagues were watching Netflix, I was devouring books on algorithmic trading, teaching myself to code in Python, and building predictive models on a second-hand computer I'd bought off Craigslist. I started with a tiny pot of money, the cash from my dad, and a few thousand I'd saved from college jobs. I didn't day trade. I was a sniper. I built an algorithm that scanned for micro-inefficiencies in small-cap biotech stocks, tiny arbitrage opportunities that the big firms ignored because they were too small. It was a painstaking, high-risk game. For weeks, I lost more than I made. I lived on instant noodles and cheap coffee, the fluorescent hum of my computer monitor, my only companion late into the night. But then my models started getting better. I learned. I adapted. $100 gain here. A $500 gain there. It was a slow, grueling climb. During this time, I stumbled upon my weapon. It was almost by accident. I was researching a company and fell down a rabbit hole into public real estate records. Out of morbid curiosity, I looked at my father's house. I saw the original deed, in his and my mother's name. Then I saw the refinancing documents from after he'd married Diane. Her name was on everything now. But I also saw something else. I saw the property assessments, the loan applications she had co-signed. And I saw the name of her private LLC, Pasadena Prestige Properties, listed as a creditor against one of her own investment properties. It was a shell corporation, a common tool, but something about it felt off. I started digging. It took weeks of cross-referencing public records, business filings, and archived social media posts. What I found made my blood run cold. Diane wasn't just a successful real estate agent. She was a predator. Her specialty was finding older, financially comfortable men who were recently widowed or divorced, men like my father. She would charm her way into their lives and their finances. Then, using a network of shady appraisers and mortgage brokers, she would convince them to invest in overpriced properties owned by her shell corporations. She was selling them assets she secretly owned at massively inflated prices, pocketing the difference, all while making them think she was a brilliant investment partner. She hadn't just been sabotaging my future. She'd been systematically draining my father's. The beautiful house, the Lexus, the designer clothes. It was all funded by a slow, methodical theft of my family's legacy. My inheritance. My mother's memory. The rage I felt was so pure and so cold it was almost serene. This was no longer just about a cruel comment at graduation. This was about justice. My Sunday dinners took on a new purpose. They were reconnaissance missions. I'd ask Diane innocent-sounding questions about the real estate market, praising her business acumen. "I'm so impressed by how you find those deals, Diane. The market is so volatile." She lapped it up, her ego making her careless. She'd boast about a hidden gem she'd found for a client in San Marino, or a brilliant flip she'd orchestrated in La Canada. Each boast was a breadcrumb. I'd go home, pull up the property records, and connect the dots. Each transaction led back to one of her shell companies. I was building a case, a meticulous, undeniable dossier of fraud. All the while, my secret trading account was growing. The small wins had compounded. A successful bet on a pharmaceutical trial pushed my portfolio into 6 figures. I didn't touch a penny of it. I kept living in my Koreatown hovel, driving my beat-up Honda Civic, and wearing my thrift store clothes. To Diane and my father, I was still struggling Eliza, the girl who would be lucky to manage a Starbucks. The 2-year mark was approaching. I knew I needed a centerpiece for my revenge, a perfect, theatrical symbol of her downfall. And I knew exactly what it had to be. Diane had a peculiar obsession. For years, she had kept a picture on the refrigerator, torn from a vintage car magazine. It was a 1967 Mercedes-Benz 280 SL, the Pagoda model, in a stunning shade of silver blue. It was her holy grail, the one thing she talked about constantly. "When we finally sell the old cabin, Frank," she'd say, "that's the first thing I'm buying. It's not just a car, it's a statement." It was a statement of class, of old money, of an echelon of society she was desperate to belong to. It was the perfect target. Using a portion of my trading profits, I hired a private investigator, an old-school gumshoe who specialized in financial fraud. I handed him my research. "I want you to verify all of this," I told him. "And I want you to find every single transaction, every hidden account, every piece of paper that connects Diane Sterling to this fraud. I want it ironclad." While he worked, I started hunting for the car. These cars were rare, especially in pristine condition. I set up alerts, scoured auction sites, and contacted classic car brokers. Finally, I got a hit. A private collector in Carmel by the Sea was selling his late wife's 1967 280 SL, silver blue. Flawless restoration. Low mileage. It was the exact car from the picture on her fridge. I took a day off from my data entry job, telling my boss I had a stomach bug. I drove the 5 hours up the coast in my sputtering Civic and met the owner. He was an elderly gentleman who clearly loved the car. He showed me the engine, the original Becker radio, the immaculate cream leather interior. I didn't haggle. I looked him in the eye and said, "I'll wire you the full asking price tomorrow." The price was $150,000. I paid for it in cash from a new bank account he knew nothing about, transferring the funds from my trading portfolio. I arranged for it to be transported down to Los Angeles in an enclosed trailer, to be delivered on a specific date, Saturday, June 4th, Diane's 55th birthday. 2 years, almost to the day, since my graduation. The week before her birthday, my PI delivered his report. It was even worse than I had imagined. He'd found everything. Forged signatures, inflated appraisals, a secret bank account in the Cayman Islands. She had defrauded my father of nearly $2 million over 8 years. The report was a thick, spiral-bound book of pure evil. I made 2 copies. The stage was set. For her birthday, Diane had planned an extravagant garden party at the Pasadena house. She'd hired caterers, a string quartet, and a valet service. It was designed to showcase her success, her perfect life. It was the perfect venue for her public execution. I arrived early, dressed in my usual drab attire, and gave her a small, inexpensive gift, a scented candle. She accepted it with a tight, condescending smile. "Oh, Eliza, you shouldn't have." The guests began to arrive, a parade of wealthy, air-kissing socialites. I mingled quietly, a gray mouse in a flock of peacocks, letting Diane soak in the spotlight. My father, looking dapper in a new suit she'd undoubtedly picked out, followed her around like a puppy, beaming with pride at his accomplished wife. At 3 p.m., precisely as scheduled, the enclosed car carrier rumbled up the street and parked in front of the house. It was so large and out of place that the string quartet faltered, and a hush fell over the party. The driver, a man I had paid handsomely, got out, holding a clipboard. "Delivery for Ms. Diane Sterling," he announced, his voice booming across the manicured lawn. Diane's face went through a rapid series of emotions. Confusion, then irritation at the interruption, then dawning, ecstatic belief. She looked at my father, her eyes wide. "Frank, you didn't." My father looked just as bewildered. He shook his head. "It wasn't me, honey." Diane's eyes scanned the crowd, a smug smile playing on her lips. She thought one of her wealthy friends had sent her an impossibly grand gift. She glided towards the truck, a queen approaching her chariot. "Well, let's see what it is," she trilled. The driver lowered the ramp with a hydraulic hiss. The doors opened, and there it was. The 1967 Mercedes-Benz 280 SL, gleaming in the afternoon sun, a vision in silver blue. It was perfect. A giant red bow was tied to the hood. The crowd gasped. It was a showstopper, a car that dripped with elegance and wealth. Diane was speechless, her hands fluttering to her chest. She was positively vibrating with avarice and joy. This was it, the ultimate validation, the symbol of her arrival. She turned, her eyes shining with unshed tears, ready to thank her unknown benefactor. I chose that exact moment to step forward from the crowd. I was holding a small, velvet-lined box. I walked past my stunned father, past the gawking guests, and stopped right in front of her, between her and the car. I opened the box. Inside, nestled on the velvet, was a single vintage Mercedes key. I looked up and met her gaze. My voice was calm, clear, and loud enough for everyone to hear. "Happy birthday, Diane." I let the words hang in the air for a moment before continuing. "You once told me I'd never amount to anything, that I'd be lucky to be managing a Starbucks." I paused, letting the memory, the public context of her own party, sink in. I held up the key. "Well, it took me 2 years, but I just bought your dream car. Turns out, my finance degree was good for something after all." The silence that followed was absolute. You could have heard a champagne bubble pop. Her face, which had been a mask of pure ecstasy, crumbled. The color drained from her cheeks, leaving behind a pasty, slack-jawed horror. Her eyes darted from my face to the key to the car and back again, unable to process the reality of what was happening. She didn't get it. She couldn't. It was impossible. The broke, pathetic stepdaughter she had so carefully cultivated couldn't possibly afford a scented candle, let alone this. "You're lying," she whispered, her voice cracking. "This is a sick joke." "It's not a joke," I said, my voice still level. I gestured to the driver. "The title and registration are in my name. Eliza Vance." Behind her, my father was staring at me, his face a canvas of utter shock. I turned my attention to him, my expression softening slightly. "Dad," I said, holding up a thick, spiral-bound folder I'd been carrying. It was the PI's report. "I think you and I need to talk. We need to talk about where the money for this party really came from. We need to talk about Pasadena Prestige Properties and the $2 million Diane has stolen from you since you married her." I tossed the report onto a nearby table. It landed with a heavy, definitive thud. The spell was broken. The party guests began to murmur, their polite facades dissolving into raw, hungry curiosity. They smelled blood in the water. Diane looked from the report to my father's horrified face. She saw the game was up. The years of manipulation, the carefully constructed empire of lies. It was all gone, dismantled in less than 5 minutes on her own manicured lawn. She lunged for me, her face a grotesque mask of fury, her hands clawed. "You little bitch!" she shrieked. But she never reached me. My father, who had stood by silently for a decade, finally moved. He stepped between us, grabbing her arms. It wasn't a violent act, but it was firm, a final, unbreachable wall. "Diane," he said, his voice trembling with a grief and rage I had never heard from him before. "Get out of my house." Her fight vanished, replaced by a desperate panic. "Frank, no. She's lying. She's turning you against me." "Get out," he roared, and this time the entire party took a collective step back. The queen had been dethroned. The party was over. While my father's lawyers and the police sorted through the wreckage of Diane's life, I took the car. I packed a single bag, got in, and just started driving north, up the Pacific Coast Highway. The engine hummed a low, powerful purr. The California sun warmed the cream leather seats, and the salty wind whipped through my hair. I didn't know where I was going, and for the first time in a long time, it didn't matter. She always said the best revenge was living well. She just never imagined it would be me living her dream. The end.